Alright, I think we're back. Finally! This is Kara Dreamer again, with another fanfic reading, although normally I would be doing this on Saturday mornings. It is not Saturday morning, it is Sunday. And normally I would be reading just fanfic, but I've decided as a change of pace that although I'll be reading one work of Undertale fanfic, the second piece that I'll be reading is actually a friend's short story, original short story. And that's kind of something I've been more or less meaning to do eventually, was move on from just doing Undertale stuff or Steven Universe stuff or Night in the Woods stuff or whatever. I've been wanting to branch out from there, just the way that with the weird fiction readings that I've been doing, I've been wanting to branch out from just doing horror or ghost stories to other types of serious, dramatic fiction, or I just want to read aloud. And well, anyway, I think that's enough maundering before getting into it. My schedule's been a bit messed up. Recently did the shift from days to nights at work again, and I'm always confused, not knowing what I'm doing for the first week or so. Not to mention what it does to my sleep. Well, anyway, let's get to it. The first story that I'm about to read is an Undertale story focusing on Alphyne. Alphys and Undyne are my favorite monster couple from Undertale, and two characters who mean a lot to me. And this is another story by my friend Wordbending on AO3, whose her universe story is about a trans Steven Universe. I've been reading on previous installments of this broadcast, and so this in this story is tagged, for what it's worth, it's mildly not safe for work, and Alphys and Undyne are both trans in this, which is semi-close to a bit of my own headcanon, but anyway, there you go. The summary is very short. Simply reads, Undyne and Alphys make out. Alphys chews on an idea. For day 3 of Undyne Appreciation Week, Undyne's big toothy smile. And there are some notes. Excuse me. Notes. I wildly misinterpreted this prompt as being about Undyne's teeth instead of Undyne's smile, and by the time I realized it, I was too attached to this idea not to do it. Hope you have a fetish for shark teeth. And with that, my reading of Show Me Your Teeth by Wordbending. Alpha started to tug her shirt over her head. Wait! Undyne shouted, covering her eyes. Her blue skin started to turn a light shade of green. Undyne, Alpha said flatly, putting her shirt back down. That's cute and all, but it's not like you haven't seen them before. No, I mean, just... Undyne said, lowering her hands, but decidedly looking away. I don't want to, like, rush things this time, you know. Can't we just, snuggle? Alphys barely repressed a giggle, covering her snout with her claws. Her yellow tail wagged back and forth slowly. It's even cuter. You can say snuggle, Alphys. Sorry, Alphys teased. God. She scooted closer so that she was face to face with Undyne, their torsos a few inches apart. Undyne swallowed, her face still that shade of green. Alphys felt suddenly unsure about what she was doing. Undyne could be shy, but she was acting kind of weird about this. Hey, Undyne? Undyne gave an awkward smile. Yeah, Alphys? Are you, okay with this? If you don't want to... Alphys blushed. You know, I understand. We could just watch anime. Rapidly, Undyne shook her head and raised her hands in front of herself. Undyne didn't know what that meant, but Undyne started to speak very rapidly. No, I wanna... Undyne covered her face in her hands, turning even greener. Kiss you! Her voice was muffled. And snuggle with you. And do... stuff. I want it really bad, Alfie. Alphys nodded. Okay, but tell me if I'm making you uncomfortable, okay? Undyne nodded, and gently, Alphys laid herself down on top of Undyne's chest. Undyne blushed deeper as Alphys stared up at her with a small, shy smile on her face, and her hands under her chin. Her tail continued to wag. Undyne still looked on edge and was refusing to look at Alphys, even though Alphys was fully clothed. Alphys raised a hand and caressed Undyne's cheek, which, as it usually did, seemed to relax her, to reassure her that it was just her girlfriend who loved her. Undyne looked down at Alphys, and slowly a toothy grin started to form on her face. Alphys said, blinking as she stared at Undyne's smile. Undyne's brow raised. Huh? Alphys shook her head. Have I, ever told you your smile is really nice? Undyne grinned again, wider this time. Oh, yeah? Thanks! Alphys scooted even closer to her, her hand still on Undyne's cheek. And then she got closer, and even closer, so that she was at eye level with Undyne's teeth. She looked closely at the sharp, uneven fangs, all crisscrossed together at parallel angles. Undyne's teeth were like yellow-white daggers, long enough, and most likely sharp enough, that a bite from her could probably pierce through someone's arm. Inexplicably to her, Alphys blushed. She became aware that she was staring at them, which made Undyne blink. Sorry, Alphys said, backing away from Undyne's mouth. I was just admiring your... Alphys heard Undyne repress a snicker. That'll work, Alphys finished lamely. Anyway. Undyne's grin widened eagerly. Kiss time. Kiss time. Alphys took her glasses off and set them, clumsily, since she didn't want to turn her head to look and see what she was doing, on the nearby nightstand. Undyne leaned forward, wrapping her arms around Alphys's back, and pulled Alphys in. Alphys jumped, a little startled, even though she knew it was coming, but she relaxed, letting herself slink across Undyne's lithe, muscular body. They could only be so close with Alphys's weight, but Undyne was always reassuring her that she loved Alphys's body, so Alphys didn't let that bother her. Undyne's lips slid across hers, just barely, before pulling away, in what was a very chaste kiss. But Undyne came back with another, and another, and it was only moments before Alphys was planting some right back at her. Their kissing became increasingly less and less chaste, until there were no pauses between each kiss, until Undyne's hands were in Alphys's neck frill, and Alphys's were around Undyne's head, and they were pulled as tightly to each other as physics allowed. Alphys loved kissing Undyne. She didn't have a lot of experience with kissing, and their first kisses, real kisses, had been awkward and clumsy, as if either of them were afraid that kissing too hard would cause them both to literally die of embarrassment. But now that they had months, years, under their belt, every kiss with her rapidly devolved into something out of a particular genre of anime. If Undyne was still shy and hesitant at all, Alphys was not. She'd learned what Undyne liked and didn't hesitate to go for it. Alphys stopped planting kisses on Undyne's neck for a moment and just sat there against her chest, watching her breathe. Undyne was a gorgeous woman. As someone else who was trans, she'd always admired Undyne's effortless beauty, her confidence in herself. It'd taken years, and a lot of Undyne's reassurance, for Alphys to start to feel as comfortable in her own skin as Undyne did. But watching Undyne breathe in and out, her breaths heavy and labored, but her grin wide, Alphys couldn't help but notice something else. Undyne's sharp, sharp teeth. And she suddenly had an awful, awful idea. She turned an extremely dark shade of red, and Undyne's brow creased in concern. "Whoa, you okay?" she said, sitting up. "What's up?" Nothing," Alphys squeaked, raising her hands in front of herself. She glanced away, rubbing the back of her head. I was just, I just had a thought." Undyne's grin widened. She seemed to understand what she meant, which made Alphys feel even more humiliated. "Oh yeah?" said Undyne cockily. "Hit me." Alphys buried her face in her hands, turning redder and redder by the second. She groaned into her hands, suddenly deeply regretting where this conversation was going. Could you kiss me again?" she managed to ask, taking her hands away from her mouth, but keeping them over her eyes. "Yeah, sure," Undyne said, sounding mildly confused. Alphys felt as Undyne gently took her hands by the wrist and pushed them downwards out of the way of her face. Once her lips could be reached, Alphys felt as Undyne pressed her own against them, starting to kiss her. She started to kiss back, wrapping her arms around Undyne's torso. Alphys broke the kiss for a moment. Okay, she said, shutting her eyes tightly and taking a deep breath. Could you, kiss my... Undyne didn't need her to finish. She started to move down, pressing deep kisses along her jawline until her lips met the scaly yellow skin of her neck. Undyne started to suck on a scale, which made Alphys shiver. "Yeah, right? Yeah," Alphys stammered. "Anything else?" Undyne said, almost sing-song. Alphys cringed even harder. "Oh, God." Alphys, she cooed. Well, Alphys tried to say, opening her eyes and looking up towards the ceiling as Undyne continued to press kisses on her neck. She refused to look down at Undyne's face, at Undyne's teeth. The teeth she could feel in Undyne's mouth as Undyne kissed her. "Bite me!" Alphys said suddenly. Undyne raised her head slightly, narrowing her eye at Alphys. She looked offended. "Excuse me?" No, Alphys said quickly. I mean, you know, Alphys paused. Literally bite me? Alphys dared herself to look down at Undyne, whose head was still right at her neck. At first, Undyne blinked, almost tilting her head. Then, a realization seemed to pass over her, and her face changed. First, it went an extremely dark shade of green, maybe the darkest Alphys had on record. Secondly, her expression broke into a wide, fin-to-fin grin, which just made things worse. Alphys could see all of her teeth again, though they were of various sizes and angles. They were each like a mix of shark and a saber-toothed tiger, extremely long and extremely deadly looking. If Undyne's muscles weren't capable of breaking boulders by themselves, Undyne could probably win every single fight she ever fought with her teeth alone. Alphys swallowed. You sure, babe? Undyne said. Alphys was thrown off balance by her sudden confidence. She had been expecting Undyne to turn into a flailing mess, and it was only the dark green of Undyne's normally blue skin that told her Undyne was trying her damn hardest to accommodate her, instead of becoming a big blue ball of nerves. I don't want to, hurt you. These things are pretty damn sharp. God, I know, thought Alphys before shaking her head to collect her thoughts. Just be gentle, okay? Undyne looked mildly anxious, her expression unsure, but she nodded and went back down to Alphys's neck. She planted a soft, feather-light kiss on one of Alphys's scales, and Alphys became suddenly extremely aware of how close Undyne's mouth was to her bare skin. Undyne opened her mouth wide, and Alphys could see all of her teeth, the full length of them. Some of them were inches long, and they almost seemed to gleam. She was going to die. She was, literally, actually going to die. "All right?" said Undyne, her voice muffled by her mouth hanging open. She looked up at her, still looking unsure what she was doing. Alphys nodded rapidly. With incredible gentleness, Undyne moved her mouth over Alphys's neck. Alphys could feel the sharp pinpricks of her teeth, like legendary Japanese samurai swords, except, poised against her neck. And then, Undyne bit down. And that was how Alphys ended up in the hospital for 3 days. The end. Well, that was a very odd story for Toriel here to be reading to her child. But gotta learn some of the facts of life, and one of the facts of life is that Alphys and Undyne, in my headcanon anyway, kind of spend most of their free moments fucking each other, or at least, in bed with each other. We all sort of know that. Well, I don't know what to say about that. There's a few things I'd kind of like to say about. I've had my own thoughts on the sort of gender and like what would trans mean to a monster, because they're not really like humans. I actually have kind of imagined, for example, writing a story. I've mentioned about the idea of writing stories in which Kara and Asriel have been brought back. Although that idea has been mutating a little bit in my head. But one thought that I had was that Asriel might sort of post-salvation be reached with thoughts about, well, like, am I the same person anymore? Am I who I thought I was? And that might include thinking, well, maybe I'm not male anymore. Maybe that's not really me anymore. And but the thing is, I kind of think that I'd sort of been devising a headcanon where if a monster wanted to change some aspect of their body, that it would be a somewhat different idea than like we would imagine, just requiring surgery and stuff like that. But that's kind of all for the future. I haven't really thought any of this through. Anyway, charming little story. I'm always up for Alphys and Undertale enjoying each other's company. And with that, I will move on to the second work that I've set aside for myself today, which is not a work of fanfic, but an original piece that I read a few days ago for the first time, written by a friend named Kaina, whom I know off of Mastodon and elsewhere. This is a story about someone who is plural, who has more than one self in one body, which is, by the way, how I consider myself, how Kaina considers herself. And so this is a work of fiction, informed by this model that we have for our personalities. And I don't really know if there's a larger context to this work. I don't know it, but it's a standalone piece, and I liked it so much when I read it that I decided immediately afterward that I would read it on the air, and so here I am doing so. The story is entitled "You're Gonna Go Far, Kid." The moon was full and vibrant this evening, and the town of Hamlet was, for the most part, asleep. Olivia was folding her clothes to put into her backpack in the deep hours of this night. She needed out of this town if she wanted to be an actress, and she had gotten her chance with Amar. He loved her and Acella's work, and invited them to join him. Olivia was, understandably, over the moon. Acella, on the other hand, felt like her life was over. She sighed as she worked on her clothing. She didn't want to leave her friends. She didn't want to leave Hamlet. She was finally starting to feel like she was something, and now she was being dragged off by Olivia to some far-off locale. "I'm going to miss them," she said, between rolling a pair of socks together and putting them in her backpack. "We have a chance, Acella, to prove who we are," Olivia said, a bit forcefully, trying to keep Acella on task. "We could show the world how great we are as an actress and a writer. Don't you want that?" Olivia threw the rolled socks into the backpack, picking up a pair of pants and folding them in half. "I do, Olivia, but do we have to do it without them? Acela mused, looking out the window at the full moon. She folded her pants in half again and placed them in the backpack. We're only 10 years old and we're running off to join an acting troupe? Doesn't that frighten you? Acela picked up a tunic she had and began folding that as well. Olivia rolled her tunic into a small roll and placed it in the bag. Not really. It is exciting. Acela stopped, hands placed on a stuffed animal her parents bought her. What about Mom and Dad? Olivia regarded the stuffed animal with some pained fondness. They'll understand. They send us to Mr. McElroy's for a week at a time. This is just like that. But that's a week, Olivia. This is years we're talking about. Acela hugged the plush toy to her chest. Olivia shook her head and threw her stuffed animal to the ground. Do you want this or not? Answer me. Acela squeaked and felt herself shrink from the forceful nature of Olivia. Answer me. Acela, Olivia demanded. I do, yes, Acela said, picking the plush toy off the ground and turning to put it into the sack. We're taking this, though. Fine, crybaby, Olivia said acidly as she took stock of all they packed. She grabbed the letter of recommendation from her nightstand. Let's go. Wait. Acela ran to the bookshelf and grabbed her books on ink magic and some of the storybooks her cousin sent her. Olivia pursed her lips before nodding. Good choice, Acela. Well, need the practice anyway, Acela said before her and Olivia regarded themselves in the mirror. Their shared body was a small and wiry vixen, but that could and would change. They were only 10, after all. The glasses they wore were a round wire frame that Acela preferred, and Olivia thought they were miserably out of fashion. But it was what they had, and Olivia knew she could get some better glasses for them after they left Hamlet. Soon the little vixen was slipping out the front door as quietly as a bat's whisper. Both Acela and Olivia knew they had to be careful or they would wake the town. Olivia didn't want to answer any of the questions, whereas Acela didn't want to see the faces of the people she loved worry. Oh, that was slightly awkward of me, sorry. They made it to the outskirts when they were confronted by two other girls, their classmates and friends, Letitia and Ember. Ember was more of Acela's friend. Acela often loaned Ember books and sneaked extra desserts from home so the human girl could also have a nice lunch. Ember looked sad, and it tore Acela's heart up to see her friend this distraught. Letitia, on the other hand, was Olivia's friend, and a very sharp and witty-looking feline. Both girls loved acting and stage production. They found kindred spirits in one another. Letitia looked as though she knew what was happening here, and seemed concerned to how it was happening, but indifferent to what was happening. Olivia spoke up. Isn't it late to be out on a stroll, you two? I was going to say that too, Acela, Letitia said calmly. Did Amar contact you? She asked, eyeing the letter the duo held in their shared hand. Yes, he has extended an invitation to go learn to be an actress if I can just get there, Olivia said coolly. When will you be back? Ember asked. Acela shivered and started to tear up. I promise, all right, Acela blurted out, taking control again. I don't know when. Acela felt Olivia's scorn pierce her. Or if I'll be back. But I promise you I'll write. Olivia snarled in their head, seeking to pull Acela away so they could carry on with their lives. Ember nodded and then ran up and hugged her friend. You better. Acela squeezed back, tears now in her eyes. I will. Olivia finally wrenched control back to her corner, and Acela pleaded in their head. Please, Olivia, please promise. Please promise me we'll write to them. We will, Acela, Olivia said, pulling their crying form away from the hug. I need to go. The caravan departs first thing in the morning, and I need to be there. Ember nodded, still upset that she was losing her friend. Letitia hugged Olivia's and Acela's. You'd best write to me, too, about all your adventures. I want to hear about my friend's rise to fame. Olivia smiled. Of course I'll write you, too, Letitia. I owe you a lot for challenging me and helping me out with this. The hug between Olivia and Letitia was brief, and soon the friends parted ways. Two chasing after their future, and two staying behind, feeling the joy of the stage leaving them both. It's my turn to shine, Acela. I know it's better for us, and just trust me, we'll be amazing, Olivia said, under her breath. Acela, however, was still longing for Ember, the closest friend she'd ever known in her life. The dawn came to Hamlet, but it was colder that morning. The passionate actress had sucked the heat right out of the town today. And that is the end. It was a short piece. There are some endnotes I'd like to read. So, this is actually a pivotal moment for an RPG character I'm working on, for Big Fat Phase game I am going to play in. Acela is a shy but studious and hardworking but clever girl, whereas her other part of her, Olivia, is just as clever and hardworking, but she's bold and brash. This is the start of their story as they try to reconcile their differences and work together. I hope you enjoy, and I'm certain I'll be adding more from their story here when it comes up. And, that was a fairly turned out to be shorter than I've usually read, and so I'm somewhat tempted to add a third piece. What can I add, however, on short notice? Permit me to flail around a little bit. There's more work in this Undyne Appreciation Week about Alphys and Undyne, and I will never tire of reading Alphys and Undyne. This might be a good choice. Here's the previous piece in the series called Cherish This Lizard. Again, this is by Wordbending, and this comes with a couple content warnings. Suicidal thoughts, severe depression, mentions of child death. So, in any case, it might be a somber note on which to conclude, but I will now be reading Cherish This Lizard. The summary reads: Undyne visits Alphys' apartment, but Alphys, for some reason, is nowhere to be found. For Day 2 of Undyne Appreciation Week, favorite thing about Undyne. The notes read: For this prompt, I chose as my favorite thing Undyne's strong sense of empathy, her ability to care about other people and to be calm, collected, and able to comfort people who need it. My second favorite thing is, of course, her muscles. So, there you go. And I now begin Cherish This Lizard by Wordbending. With a single heavy crunch, Undyne kicked down the door to Alphys's apartment. Literally. The door slammed into a wall on the opposite side of the room and fell into a heap to the floor. "Alfie!" shouted Undyne, grinning from fin to fin. She waved a bouquet of sunflowers, sending petals floating to the apartment floor. "I did that thing from that anime you like. I got you plants!" There was no response from Alphys. The tightly packed living room, with its high-definition television and hundreds of anime DVDs, figurines, consoles, and games, all cramped into a space a few broom closets wide, was even messier than normal. Everything was covered in dust. DVDs lay scattered all over the floor, and one of Alphys's prized figures was laying in the middle of the room, minus a head. Undyne was sometimes impressed by Alphys's capability for somehow destroying her own home. After all, Undyne had been only gone from Alphys's apartment for 1 day. Undyne knew Alphys well enough that she knew when the house was this much of a mess, Alphys was usually sleeping on her cheap second-hand couch covered in a blanket, a remote, or a controller laying on the floor nearby. But Alphys wasn't on the couch, or on the floor, or in her tiny kitchen that was nothing more than a fridge and a microwave. "Alphys?" Undyne called, her face falling. Still no reply. A pang of fear suddenly shot through Undyne, which she quickly tried to push downwards. This wasn't weird. Alphys did this kind of thing all the time. She was used to it. Mostly. Only one place left then, if she was home, her bedroom. Alphys's bedroom. The bedroom belonging to Alphys. Undyne blushed. She shook her head, attempting to collect her thoughts. She'd been in Alphys's bedroom before. Just, usually with Alphys there. Undyne felt herself blushing deeper. "I'm coming in!" Undyne said, sidling towards the bedroom. Still no reply. She knocked on the door, but still nothing happened, so Undyne finally turned the doorknob and slid the door open. The door caught on something on the floor, some kind of unfinished machine, all wires and green square things. It only took a little of Undyne's strength to get the door open, sending the machine, whatever it was, bouncing along the floor as the force of the door shoved it out of the way. Undyne stuck her head through the door and peered around. There was nobody in the bed, though looking at Alphys's bed forced Undyne to stop and keep herself in the present. She turned to Alphys's desk, the one with the giant weathered Mew Mew Kissy Cutie print. Next to the print was a dizzying array of statistics, drawings, and figures, written in Alphys's scratchy, almost unreadable handwriting. And there she was. Alphys was sitting in her chair, lying across the desk, several more unfinished machines, and a variety of engineering tools scattered across the floor and across the desk's surface. But, to Undyne's shock, Alphys wasn't sleeping. Instead, Alphys merely stared straight at her from where her head rested on her arms, her eyes empty and cold. Undyne's heart raced until Alphys finally, slowly, blinked. Thanking whatever higher power was out there for it, Undyne pushed the door open the rest of the way and rushed to her side. She got down on her knees so she could sit at Alphys's level, the bouquet of sunflowers tucked carefully under her arm. "Alfie?" Undyne said, keeping her voice low and quiet. Alphys's eyes glanced away from her, towards the desk. Her snout remained buried between her arms. "Alfie, it's me. I kind of kicked your door down again. Sorry, I got excited." Undyne lifted the bouquet of flowers from under her arm and raised it in front of Alphys. Many of the sunflowers had been crushed under it, and one of them was already starting to wilt. "I got you these things," Undyne said, grinning. "The flower lady was super cool. You should meet her sometime." With no expression, Alphys rolled her head so that she wasn't facing Undyne anymore, but was now staring at the other wall. Undyne merely followed her to the other side. Undyne was more afraid of how Alphys was acting than she was of anything, but she had seen Alphys's bad days before. She had seen Alphys at what she thought was her lowest. Hell, she wasn't totally stupid. She knew by now that the very first day she'd ever met Alphys was when Alphys was, in multiple ways, at her lowest possible point. But it didn't make it any less frightening when she came to Alphys's house and Alphys was giving her the cold, scaly shoulder. When Undyne reached the other side, Alphys was crying. Undyne couldn't hear it, but she could see it, the tears rolling down her white shirt. And it was enough for Undyne almost to feel her soul shatter. "Alphys," Undyne said, swallowing. She reached out a hand for Alphys's shoulder, but hesitated, pulling her hand back. "Can I?" Alphys nodded slowly, sniffling. Gently, Undyne placed a hand on her shoulder, rubbing it gently. "What's up?" she said, her tone not at all casual. "You could talk to me, you know. Alfie, I'm your..." Undyne blushed yet again. Your girlfriend, you know?" Alphys buried her head deeper in her arms. Undyne heard her say something, but it was so muffled she couldn't understand it. "Alphys, I can't hear you." Alphys shifted just enough for her mouth to be free. I don't deserve it," Alphys said. Her voice was hoarse and quiet, like she didn't want to speak, but also that she was having trouble being able to. If Undyne hadn't felt her heart breaking before, she was really feeling it now. Instantly, she opened her mouth to protest. I don't deserve you," Alphys continued. Her voice got more wobbly, less intelligible. You're good. Really good. I'm not. At all. "Alfie," Undyne said quietly, continuing to rub her girlfriend's shoulder. "You know that's not true." Alphys didn't respond. She only buried her head back in her arms, looking back down towards the desk. "You're not just good, Alphys. You're amazing," Undyne said, her eyes wide, clenching both her teeth in one of her fists. She kept her voice low in something like a whispered shout. "You're the smartest, coolest, most passionate nerd I've ever met. Like, I tell you all the time. And you've only gotten even cooler. You're doing so much to help people with all your science stuff." Undyne heard a muffled scoff. I know you feel you hurt people really badly," Undyne said, and Alphys tensed, coiling even further into herself. But, Alphys, you remember what I told you back then? You told people the truth. Their families came back together and everyone's happy, right? You did a really good thing." Alphys rose from her seated position, although she still didn't quite look at Undyne. Undyne continued to rub her shoulder as comfortingly as she could manage. I made them into Alphys started to say, her eyes looking more distant than ever. These things, these creatures, it's all my fault. Alphys rubbed at her tear-stained cheeks, burying her head in her hands. Jesus. There's nothing I could do to make up for that. Nothing. Alphys, Undyne said quietly. Alphys merely sniffled. Alphys. Undyne tried again. Alphys. I killed someone. Alphys's head shot up. She opened her clawed fingers, peering through them with wide eyes. What? Alphys stammered. When? When I was a teenager, Undyne said. She raised her hand, jabbing a finger at her eye patch. It was a human kid. That's how I lost this thing. Alphys lowered her hands. Her shoulders had tensed, as if she was afraid Undyne was going to kill her. Undyne reminded herself it was just the shock from what she'd said. And you know, I never felt guilty about it. Spent so long feeling proud about it, happy about it, till Undyne sighed. You know, they happened. Frisk. Not just them either. All those kids I teach at the school, all the human ones, all the parents I speak to, all the parents I don't speak to because those kids don't have parents, or their parents don't care. That kid was probably just like those kids, you know? And I killed them. And it didn't even make a difference in the end. It almost got you killed, Alphys. She heard Alphys gulp. But he didn't know. He didn't know humans could be good. Undyne looked away. Yeah, I guess. But it doesn't make me feel any better about it. Alphys folded her hands in front of her snout, twiddled her fingers together. I'm sorry. It's okay. There's nothing to be sorry about. There was a long pause where neither of them said anything. It's different for me, Alphys eventually said, breaking the silence. I wasn't trying to save us or anything. I wasn't trying to break the barrier. Not really. I was just being stupid, desperate. Undyne tightened her grip on Alphys' shoulder, but she gave her a small smile. I was stupid and desperate too. It's okay to be stupid sometimes. Even when you're as smart as you, Alphys. Alphys raised a hand and rubbed at her eye. I guess so. Gently, carefully, Undyne leaned forward towards Alphys. Alphys blinked in surprise before Undyne, her face a deep shade of green, kissed her on the forehead. Alphys replied, with much less warning, by grabbing Undyne's head with both hands and pulling her all the way in. She smashed her lips against hers clumsily, her hands pulling Undyne as close to her as she could. Undyne could barely react. Her heart did more than skip a beat. It played a game of hopscotch over the beats. Her face was so green that she looked like a completely different species. But then, when Alphys pulled away, her face a deep, deep red that set off her bright yellow scales, Undyne started to laugh. I love you, Alfie, you know that? I'll always love you. Alphys smiled at her. I love you too. Undyne grinned her toothy grin. Hell yeah. She leaned in for another kiss, but Alphys only wrapped her arms around her neck and pulled her into her hug instead, resting her head on Undyne's neck. Undyne smiled and reached up to pat her on the back. Hey, Oh, sorry, wrong voice. Hey, what do you say I get you a blanket? And, Undyne scratched the back of her head with her other hand, looking away. You can go take a nap, and I could, maybe sleep in the same bed as you, and we could cuddle. Yeah. Alphys gave her a small, soft smile. That sounds nice. And that is the end. That was a somber story. It varies a bit. I loved it, mind you. I absolutely loved it. It does vary a bit in... everyone's got a little bit different headcanon about stuff. My own kind of belief, so to speak, is that Undyne had never met a human before Frisk, ever. That no one had, except for a very few monsters who were still alive, including Toriel and Asgore, of course, and that's why I think that kind of explains why no one seems to recognize what Frisk is, even Undyne seems a little surprised, that she says to Frisk before they have their fight that watching all that anime, I thought humans were kind of cool, and I don't think that's something that she would have said if she'd ever actually met a human. So that's part of my headcanon anyway. It does leave unanswered the question of how Alphys really did lose her eye. And that's actually something I've never come up with a satisfactory answer for myself. Also, there seems to be a general assumption that when Undyne first met Alphys, that it was right in the middle of all that amalgamate business. I actually put it well before that, and basically postulate that Alphys was depressed, even to the point of contemplating suicide, basically her whole life, and that if she was as Undyne saw her at that moment, it didn't have anything to do with with what would happen later. Anyway, that's all, you know, grist for the mill, really, for the fanfic mill. And I don't know that I'm ever... It's unclear at this point whether I'll be returning to writing Undertale fanfic, kind of full-fledged stories. I've been slowly developing other ways to get that creative urge out of me, and I have so little extracurricular time away from my job to do things. Unfortunately, I'm trying to figure out a way to keep the flame burning, you could say, until more time comes into my life. And reading these stories on the air is one way I've been doing that. So I really hope that people have been enjoying it. And with that, I think I will be concluding today's fanfic reading hour. And, well, have a good day, everybody, and stay determined. This is Kara Dreamer, signing off.